Hey YouTube. Today I want to talk about coping mechanisms for meltdowns. Have you ever been in the middle of the grocery store and you see that kid who all of a sudden, for some reason, mom's leaned over and said something to them, and now they're on the floor screaming their brains out, kicking, head banging, just pulling what looks like a full out temper tantrum? That's when people stop and stare. I've had moms who said to me, "Why can't you control your own child?" Literally said to me, "Can't you control your own child?" And I've turned around and I've said, "My child has autism. Would you like to control her?" And they walk away, giving me a disgusted look. Either way, people nowadays are not aware of what autism really is and how it affects a child's everyday life. I find that in the grocery store, I often have parents who look at me because my kid is screeching at the top of her lungs, and they look at me like, "Why did you even bring her here?" I also get a lot of the older generation who speak amongst themselves, the two old biddies standing beside each other, giving that look of just pure and utter disgust, like, "Oh, if that was my kid, I would have done this." Unfortunately, that isn't your kid. Unfortunately, that's not something I can control. Unfortunately, this is painful for my child. And yet I consistently bring my child to the grocery store, not because I love torturing her, but because she needs to learn coping mechanisms. Children with autism have so many issues that stem from sensory to nonverbal to verbal or limited communication, and they cannot process the world as you or I do. Therefore, they go into what looks like a temper tantrum, which is not. It's actually called stimming, or most parents use the word meltdowns. And this is how they learn, or this is how they outlet their frustration, the pain that they may be feeling at the time. Most children, when they're in meltdown mode, cannot communicate. They're too far gone. Recently, we've had issues with Nevaeh and the fact that she is often, when we tell her no, she can't have something, it first starts out literally as a temper tantrum. But then she ends up working herself up so bad that it's no longer a temper tantrum, it becomes a meltdown. All her senses are going off. The fact that somebody is talking over her, that her brothers are in her space, that the room might be too crowded, there's too many things beside her. All of a sudden she can hear the TV loud enough. She can hear the hum of the fridge. She can feel and hear everything. And she all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but gradually she works herself up where she starts hyperventilating, where she can't breathe. And when she gets to the hyperventilation stage, it's, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe, I'm choking," and then the anxiety sets in. The anxiety that she can't breathe, that she's going into panic, and because she knows that what's coming next is meltdown, where all the senses are going off, and she literally has an anxiety attack. We used to be able to give her a stuffed toy or a blanket and allow her to squeeze herself into a tight space behind furniture or into a corner. But as she's grown, she's no longer capable of squeezing herself between the furniture without moving the furniture. The stuffies aren't helping her, they aren't calming her down. She's resorted to banging her head again. And as a mother, I'm at a complete and total loss. Hugging her tightly sometimes would work. The calm talking into her ear would sometimes work. Now, she doesn't hear anything. It's as if I'm talking to a brick wall. She doesn't hear it. She doesn't hear the soothing sound of my voice anymore. She doesn't. The Me hugging her tightly actually makes it worse for her because now she feels even more constricted. So we have set up her bedroom as a sensory room where her bed is now inside what used to be a play bed. Basically, we took an old bunk bed frame, built walls onto the side of it, made it look like a castle, and on top of the bed sat her mattress, and underneath was a playhouse. We have now had to take the mattress off the top and put it on the floor inside the bed, which is confined enough, but not. It's still a tight enough space where she's comfortable. The only thing that she has in there are her favorite blanket, her stuffed dog, which she uses as a pillow, and her bedding. There's no sharp objects, nothing. She cannot hurt herself, and we literally have to put her in the bottom of her bed. As a parent, when you watch your child go through a meltdown, and especially those in public, are extremely difficult. I was in Tim Hortons the one time, and this is when she was first learning to cope with being in public, and we tried multiple things. And talking through it with her and giving her time to understand what was going to happen, what we were going to do, seemed to help. She did great. She stood in line. She sat down at the table. And then it became busy because the high school students let out for their lunch, which was, I didn't realize, but in hindsight, it was 2020. And all of a sudden, this coffee shop became a loud, buzzing, full of noise place for her. And she ended up crawling underneath the table. And eventually, I just let her go there because she could squeeze herself underneath the table and the chair, and that made her feel better. And she ended up smacking her head off the top of the chair, which ended up sending her into full-blown meltdown mode. Just that one little knock of the head was enough to send her senses into overdrive. And I heard the cashier talking with one of her other customers. And she says, if that was my kid, I would drag her out of here kicking and screaming. I cannot believe that she's allowing her kid to scream in my store. She spoke about my child directly, loud enough for me to hear, with another customer. Let me tell you, when I got home, I made a point of calling the head office and telling them exactly what happened and explaining that my child has autism. So just because my child has a disability that she gets overwhelmed and goes into overdrive means that she's no longer allowed in a public place because somebody didn't like the fact that she was crying loudly. I'm sorry, but that is unacceptable. And that is part of my point with this blog, is that I'm hoping to reach out to other parents who are going through the same things that I am. And I'm also hoping to raise awareness for my child so that the ignorant person in Tim Hortons no longer has something to say about my child, who might actually take the time to think twice and say, I wonder if something else is going on. To those two old biddies who are talking in the grocery store and saying, if that was my child, yeah, if that was your child, you'd be doing the same thing I was. And to any other person who stares at me and gives me sympathetic looks and says, I know exactly what you're going through, you don't. You have no idea. Walk a mile in my shoes and then in hers, and you'll know what we are going through.